All right, as mentioned, today we're going to try to build an application from scratch. I built it. I think it works okay. Is it possible that when we go through it that you'll find mistakes? Sure it is. I wrote it. So of course it is. But and this is something I did all from scratch. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it, oh, I did it all from scratch. I'm so proud. I just mean that it's possible that I missed things. I didn't try to though. So I'd like you to please get into Visual Studio. We're going to do this a little bit differently than we've done it before, so I'll wait till everybody gets on their machine and get started. So when you get to right here, please just stop, because we're going to do this a little differently than any other project we've done this semester. All right, has everybody had a chance to get here? We're all here? Okay. So we are going to create a new project. But unlike what we've been doing previously, what I'd like you to do is come up here and search for class library. What we want to do here is we're going to create a library with two classes in it. One that represents a book, one that represents a bookstore. Then we're going to create another project that's going to work with that bookstore library in console format. And tomorrow we'll create another project in this same thing, but it'll do the bookstore in a GUI format. But the idea is that we should be able to use the same class library for both programs. Why should we have to duplicate code? It really makes no sense to do that. Even if it can be done just through copy and paste, who cares? All right. So with class library, I want the let's see. I want the .NET Framework class library, if there is one, for C#. So let's see. Class library, .NET Standard, .NET Core. The .NET Standard should work just fine. This one right here. I believe that's the one I used. All right, and then click Next. And as always, of course, it's going to ask you for a couple things. All right, it's going to ask you for both a project name, there are three things, a location, and a solution name. Well, we're going to call the project name here Book Library. I'm going to save mine to my desktop, but I don't want the solution name to be Book Library. All right, I'm just going to call my solution Books. Okay. All right, so I've got a project name called Book Library. It is not at all, of course, mandatory. We're creating a class library, which is why I'm using the word library. By no means do you have to do that. Be real leery, though, of naming a lot of stuff and giving it the same name. I've seen people do that in the past, and it's, you're working with software. And I'll tell you this, those of you who, if there's anybody in here that's married, you'll be able to understand this. And that is that working with software and fighting with it is like fighting with your spouse. Doesn't matter how right you are, you lose anyway. All right, that's just the way that it is. All right, so I might go and rename a bunch of stuff and have something with the same name, and the system might get confused. It's like, you shouldn't be confused. Well, it is. All right, so with all that said, I'm going to click Create. And I come in here, and you'll notice I now have, as it says, I now have this book library. All right, and this book library has in it class 1. Guess what? This is just a default class that it throws in here. This class 1, we don't even want that. So I'm going to right mouse click on where it says class 1 over here on the right, and I'm just going to choose delete. And of course it comes back and it says, hey, this is deleted permanently. Are you sure? Yes. And it's gone. So now that's all that's in here. All right. we're going to create two classes in this library. The first will be very similar to what we've done over the last 2 days with the product maintenance program and with the customer maintenance program. All right, so the first one we're going to do is we're going to come in here and I'm going to right mouse click on where it says book library, not on the solution, but on the project name. And I'm going to choose add. And again, you can either choose new item and class, or you can right mouse click, choose add, and just go down to class. Either one brings you to right here. It really and truly doesn't matter. All right. Now, pretty much the norm is when you have a class, you make the class usually singular, because this is going to represent a book. All right. We may create several book objects, but the class itself typically is done in a singular format. Now, that said, if you, I don't like that, I'm going to make it books. You can do that. All right, but that's typically not what you do. So again, I'm just going to call this book singular, B-O-O-K with a capital B, and hit enter. All right. And I want to make sure that from the get-go, I don't run into those same issues that I had yesterday. So I'm going to put the word public in front of class book. All right, we just started. We got in, and this time when we started, instead of creating a console or creating a GUI, we chose that we wanted to create a class library. All right, and then it gave us a single class in it called class 1. We removed class 1, and now we're creating a book class. All right, I'll try to slow down so you can catch back up. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we want to create our instance variables. Now, if this was a true book class, we'd have more than the 3 variables I'm going to add right now. So we're going to add a title, an author, and a price. That said, again, typically you might have things like publisher. You would have things like number of pages. And there could be, ISBN number. We can do all that stuff, but I don't want to right now. I want to keep this fairly simplistic, especially so since tomorrow when we go over and we convert it into a GUI, you're not confused. I don't know if you agree with this or not, but it's really easy to get confused with this stuff. All right. Okay, so each book has what? Each book will have private string title, private string author, and private decimal price. And again, there shouldn't be anything that's a surprise about that to anybody in this room. We've done this kind of stuff enough that it shouldn't be a surprise. All right. The next thing we're going to do is, again, very similar to what we've been doing. We're going to create 2 constructors. We're going to create a parameterless constructor and then a fully parameterized constructor. But we're going to do it a little bit differently with the parameterless one. So I'm just going to put it in, and then I'll explain to you exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. All right. So I'm going to put a comment in here that says parameterless constructor. Now, in the past, we've done this. Public, book, paren, and then we just put in curly braces, like that. And it works. The problem is, since we're using a console and we're not going to be, totally, we want to make sure that if it happens, somehow, that somebody is able to create a book from this constructor, we're protected. I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense or not. But what we're going to do is this. We're going to say this dot title equals, and I'm just going to put no title supplied. Okay? And we're going to say this dot author equals no author supplied. And then finally, we'll say this dot price, and we'll just set it equal to 0, 0.00M. All right, so that will be our default or our parameterless constructor. Now, if we didn't do this, you should get this by now, that title would have an empty string for its value, and author would have an empty string for its value. Now, if we are working with a database, which is what we'll get to again after the break, that can be really problematic to have to check for a lot of empty strings. But it's much easier for me to be able to check for no title supplied or no author supplied. All right, we're even going to set it up so you can have a book for free. You know, I mean, sometimes book places, they have a buy one, get one free, or maybe they just got old books that aren't classic books. They're things that never sold, you know, that they're trying to get rid of. We're not going to allow a negative price, but we will allow a price of 0 and above. I didn't put a maximum in here. I didn't create a bunch of constants. We could have done that. All right. Now, I don't know if you read this. I thought it was interesting, at least. What's her name? Angela Jolie. She just sold a painting this week that was painted by Winston Churchill. And I think that it went for like $8.5 million, something like that. Why? Because it's a classic. There's not anything to say that somebody couldn't find the original copy, if there was one, of Moby Dick or something like that. And it could sell for millions. That is possible that that could happen. So I don't want to put an upper end on here, because if I did, I'd probably make it such a ridiculously large number that it would never be reached anyway. All right, I'd probably make it like 100 million or $1 billion, thinking that that'll never be reached. But guess what? By the time I'm fertilizer, all right, there very well could be something that is $1 billion. All right, you just never know. All right, so that's my parameterless constructor. So let's put in our fully parameterized constructor. All right, and I'm just going to steal this code for right now, make my changes to it. So this is going to say what? I'm just going to use the names we have. So I'm going to say string title, string author, decimal price. And again, if you don't like that, feel free to say, for example, string T for title, string A for author, string P for price. You can do that. It'll work just fine. I'm trying to write this example that we're going through so you've got something to use, and it's something that becomes fairly intuitive, hopefully, to you. All right? So these are going to have to change. This will have to change to the word title. This will have to change to the word author. And this will have to change to the word price. All right? Questions on anything so far? Have you been able to catch up, Gabriel? Okay. All right, so what's left? Well, what we're going to do next is we're going to put in our getters and setters. And I want to show you something, so I'm only going to put in the first one for right now. And rather than you typing in it, I'd like you to take a look at the screen, okay? So I'm going to say here public, it won't go anywhere, so it'll come back in just a second. String title. Now what we've done, and you can do it, totally legit, to say get, and then return title, and then set, and say title equal value. It's totally fine. All right. However, if I take my mouse and I put it here, notice I get this light bulb on the side. And when you get that light bulb on the side, basically Visual Studio is trying to tell you, hey, you can optimize this code if you'd like to. So let's see what it suggests. So I'm going to click on the light bulb, and it says use expression body. And I'm going to use that one. So notice what I can do. Now, if that was confusing to you, Don't do it that way. All right? So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to leave this here, but I'm going to comment it out. And I'm going to say what is shown in the getter below can be rewritten as follows. All right, and then I'm going to come back and put it in the way it was. So get return title. And I will tell you something. I've said this before. I don't think what I'm about to say is funny. So if you're like, oh, bad joke, it's not meant to be. I don't know of anybody who's ever gotten into this field because they like to type. And to me, typing this is much easier than typing this. Now, if you don't agree, just keep it that way. It's totally fine. All right. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to get rid of that comment because I don't want to put that comment in there of the what is shown thing. I don't want to put that in there multiple times. But I'm going to put my next one in, and that's going to be for author. All right. And then I'm going to copy that because that's a little more like what I want. And I'm going to paste it in again, and that's going to be a public decimal for the price. All right, so taking it again, oops, not author equal price. That should be price equal value. There you go. So taking it from the top. Looks like I'm not even using any of these, but I'm just going to leave them there in case I need them later. That's fine. All right. So I had my 3 instance variables. Notice they're private, which means that there's only other classes that don't use my library aren't necessarily going to be able to manipulate these variables unless they use public methods that I provide. All right. So what we're doing right here, if you remember when I went over those 4 pillars of object-oriented programming, we're doing some encapsulation. All right. We're taking stuff that doesn't need to be public and we're making it private. All right. Then we came in and made our parameterless constructor, and unlike what we had been doing, all right, we did give everything a value. Again, you don't have to do this. You'll oftentimes see this, but you'll oftentimes not see this. It just depends, what happens is typically programmers over time, they develop their own style. I mean, I got to the point, not always, but quite often, when I was working as a professional programmer, when I was doing maintenance work, I could kind of tell, at least on occasion, whose code I was maintaining, because they had a certain style. Now, we were supposed to, when I worked at AT&T, we had a style manual, but people put their own nuances in, the way they name variables. They either gave them good names like title, author, and price, or they gave them crummy names like T, A, and P. All right. So that was our parameterless constructor. There was our fully parameterized constructor. So that's when we were passing in a title, an author, and a price. And again, as I mentioned, this could be just T if we wanted to, just A if we wanted to, and just P if we wanted to. Actually, in the program that we're doing, it's fairly simplistic. We're not doing any right now. We're not doing any inheritance, so we don't have to worry about base where we're passing things up. So T, A, and P would have worked just fine here. All right. Then we did our getters and setters. And as mentioned, this get return title right here could have been rewritten as this, using what's called a lambda expression. All right. So we had our public string for our title. We had our public string for our author, and our public decimal for our price. There's only one more thing we want to do, and then this class is finished. And that is, we want to say public string and we want to overwrite the toString method. We're going to add something to this in just a second. You'll notice I'm getting an error. By now, this should be almost second hat to you or second nature. We're not returning anything yet. We've said it's going to return a string. That's why it's giving us an error. All right. So we're going to do this. Return. And this is just what I came up with. Title plus title plus a blank space plus, and I'm putting this on multiple lines just so you can read it, author, plus author plus a blank space plus price plus price, and I'm going to do that with a toString so that I can make that currency format. All right. So, in other words, don't type this, but the idea is we'll have this. Title, Moby Dick. Author, I don't know. Who knows? Price, $35. Does that make sense? That's what we're going to have in this. I'm not, don't type that in. Now, if you look, I'm getting a message here. And it says, hides inherited member toString. To make current, you must add the override keyword. You may remember this from 2 days ago when we went through the animal example, that when we didn't override toString, it didn't use this toString, it used the default toString. We want it, whenever we print out something, we want it to use this one. So we need to, at the beginning of this, add the word override. And now you'll notice that that error message has gone away. And it wasn't an error, it was a warning, because it was in green, not in red. That's it for this first class that we're going to do. And in just a second, we're going to create a second class, and it's a lot shorter. It's probably about 10 or 12 lines. All right. Any questions on anything in this book class? All right. So I'm going to do a save all here. Click my double disk icon. I'll leave this open in case I do want to come back to it. But I'm again going to right mouse click on my book library. Again, I'm going to choose add, and this time I'm just going to go down to the bottom and choose class. All right. Well, we've got a book class now, and the idea is these books are going to be in a bookstore. So I'm going to make a second class called BookStore with a capital B and a capital S, and I'm running the two words together. Now, when you do this, I'm not doing this, but if I had typed it like this, that would mean it's a variable. That's called camel casing. When the first word starts with a lowercase, and the second word and everyone that comes after it is an uppercase. When you do it like this, which is what we're doing here, it's called Pascal case. Not that that's a big thing, and Pascal is, I used to actually teach the Pascal programming language. It was in vogue probably 20 or 30 years ago. All right, but I just wanted you to see that because it's not even, I mean, if you made a class and your class books, if you made it a lowercase b, it would still work, but you're violating convention. All right, it's like, I think I've told you this, that when we were working with arrays, all right, when we're working with arrays, and arrays go in row, column order. Because I literally had somebody years ago who said, could I make it column row order? And I'd be, yeah, but you'd screw up everybody who wants to use your program, but yes, you can do it. There's nothing stopping you from doing it, but it's just convention that you do it the ways that I'm showing you, that's all. All right, so we've got BookStore in here. And again, I'm going to say public. at the beginning. Now, you don't have to do this, but notice if I go back and forth here, please look on the screen. Just for a second, I'm jumping back to my book. All right. And at the very top, notice namespace, book library. See that? Now when I go back to this one, namespace, book library. The reason I'm telling you that is we're basically, when we create both of our apps, the one today that we'll create using a console and the one tomorrow we'll create with a GUI, we're going to have to add a using statement at the top that's going to say using book library. That's going to mean that everything that's in there is now available to us. I should say everything public that's in there is going to be directly available to us. All right? So this is going to be a fairly short class. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create two list objects. The first represents the BookStore inventory. The second represents what you would like to buy from the BookStore inventory. All right, so we're going to create two of these. They're both going to be set up as lists, and they will be lists of type book. They're both going to be books, right? And really, in an ideal world at least, if I have an inventory and if I'm purchasing some books, what I'm purchasing is a subset. So my shopping cart, whatever I'm purchasing, is a subset of the inventory. All right, unless I come in and say, I got $1 billion with me, I'd like to buy your bookstore. It's not going to happen very often. All right, so I'm going to have in here two public lists. The first list, again, notice when I type in B-O-O, notice it sees book. All right, so this is going to be of type book. You don't have to call this thing. I could just call it, I'm going to call mine inventory list and cart list. You could just call it inventory. You could just call it cart. But a lot of times when you create something and you put list in there, it sends, a subliminal message at least to the person who's going to be possibly looking at or maintaining your code. Oh, this is a list object. So they don't have to dig through. All right. So I'm going to say inventory list equals, let me move this a little bit, and I'm going to make this smaller because I don't want it to go off the screen. I could put it on 2 lines. I'm going to just keep it on 1. New list of type book. And you'll notice if I do this, look on the screen, please. Even if you're typing, stop for a second. If I put in a semicolon, I get an error because it needs to know that this is a new object, so we need parens. All right, so I'm going to put that in. I'm going to copy that line. And my second one will have a shorter name. It's just going to be called cart list. Again, those names are 100% arbitrary. You can call them whatever the heck you want. The point is, if you do that, all right, if you do that and you create those like that and you give them different names, okay, you're going to have to change it in a lot of places in your code. That's all I'm saying. All right, so I've got public list book, inventory list, and actually I skewed some stuff here, so I'm sorry. Let's do this. Let's not even set it equal to a new book list. Let's do this. How about if we do we'll do our getters and setters like this time. All right. And I'll put my other one here. I'm sure it'll probably move it over, but that's okay. All right. And I don't know why, but it puts this in here. Have you ever seen this where it says like up there 0 references? Sometimes it'll have a number in there. It's letting you know how many times it's being referred to in your code. All right, so it's saying right now I've got these two things in here, but they're not being referred to anyplace. All right, and that's probably the way it should be because I've just created them. So, like I said, we created two objects here, two public list books, an inventory list and a cart list, and we set up our getters and setters for each one. So what should make sense to you is we need to put in a constructor. Why? It's a class, and a class needs a constructor. And we're just fine here with just a parameterless constructor. All right? So I'm going to come in and say public BookStore, paren. But what we are going to do in here is we're not going to leave it blank. We're going to put in just a couple lines of code. Now we're going to say inventory list equals new list of type book, paren, semicolon, and we're going to do the same thing with our cart list. All right, just line them up. You don't have to do that, of course. Now, we've got one method to put in, that's it, which has got about 7 or 8 lines in it. And after we put that in, we're done with this class. So we'll be done for now with our library that we're using. Okay? All right. And that class, well, ideally, in a bookstore, we're selling books, right? I don't care about coffee shops. I don't care about other stuff. I know that a lot of bookstores now sell records and stuff. I don't care. But ideally, eventually, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to check out. So that's what we're going to write. Public decimal checkout. All right. And decimal, again, I came up with arbitrary names, but this is going to be the total cost of what it is we're going to buy. So I called it total cost. All right. Now, what we want to do is we want to, again, we're assuming all we're selling is books. All right. So we want to take and add up the cost of each book. So before I typed in here, if you remember, I typed in title, Moby Dick, author, who cares, price, $25. If we have 5 or 6 of those, all we care about is that last field, that price field. We don't care what the names are of the books you're buying. We just care about the cost. All right. Okay, so that's what we're going to put in here. And there's different ways that you can do this. We could use a regular for loop, but we're going to use a for each. Let me put the whole thing in. It's only 5 or 6 lines. So I'm going to finish this, like I said, then we'll go over it. Looks like I missed a semicolon. There we go. That's it. So I'll give you a second to type that in. All right. And then we'll go over everything that it means. In fact, I'll add some comments in here because it's pretty devoid of comments right now. This is pretty obvious. This is our total cost variable. And this is saying loop through all books to be purchased. Add their price to the total cost variable. That enough? Does that make sense to people? All right. And that's what we're doing here. Now, we're assuming then you're done. So we're clearing the cart. And I don't think I have to put a to me, it would be kind of stupid to put a comment there that says return total cost. We could, but it's kind of overkill right there. All right. So taking it back again from the top, and I'll come right back down to this. This is our second class. This is going to be everything in our bookstore. In just after we take the break, probably, well, maybe we'll get started on it before the break, but we're going to allow a person to do a few things. Quit the program, that would make some sense. All right. Add a new book to the inventory. Purchase a book from the existing inventory and check out. So we're going to allow them to do 4 things. If they try to do anything else, we're not going to let them do it. We're going to make a very crude, simple little menu. And if they violate it, all we're going to do is put up the menu again. Okay? So we created 2 list objects, one to hold the inventory of the bookstore, one to hold whatever the user is attempting to buy from that inventory. In our parameter list constructor, we just create a new list of each one. Then we've got our checkout. And again, in our checkout, we're just figuring out the total cost by going through everything that's in the user's cart. And cart is pretty popular. I'm sure you've seen that. All right. You know, and it's when most people buy from Amazon, you probably even can see the little cart logo and stuff that's in there. All right. Questions? Any questions on anything that's in here that we've done so far? All right, I'm going to do a save all again, and I may need to open them later, but for now I'm going to close both of my classes. So I'm back to here. All right. And now, as you'd guess, we got some code to write. All right. How much? Well, enough that it'll take a while. How's that? All right. So now I want to come in here, and I want to come in to my solution, not to the book library. I want to right mouse click on my solution that says Solution Books right there. I'm going to add, and now I want to add a new project. This project, again, is going to be referencing or using our book library of classes. So I'm going to click right here. I'm going to choose New Project. As always, it asks me what kind. I want this to be a console app. And really, I'd rather have it be a console app with a .NET framework, C# right there. I'm going to click Next. We can call this whatever we want, but since we're working off of a bookstore, I'm going to call this one Bookstore Console, and the one we create tomorrow, I'm going to call Bookstore GUI. Make sense? All right. So I'm going to run the words together again using, as I mentioned, this Pascal casing. So Bookstore Console will be this one. And again, you'll notice it's automatically putting it into my book's solution name, which is what I want anyway. All right, create. All right, so we get all this stuff at the top. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do one more using statement, and we're going to put in using book library. All right, now for whatever reason it's given me an error, and I want to see if I can figure out why. All right, I think I know why, but I'm not positive. If you got that error, don't worry about it. That does say public, okay. And that says public, okay. I thought that we could just manually type it in, but it may not like the fact that we're just manually typing it in like that. So let's do this. Totally fine. Just for now, remove it. All right. And take your cursor, and this is what we're using right here. Let's try to right mouse click. And I think we're going to have to right mouse click on the name of our project and choose Add and go to Reference. You all hear what I said? right mouse click on the name of our new project, which is Bookstore Console, choose Add, and go to Reference. All right. If this doesn't work, I'm not worried about it because we'll get it in eventually. So click Reference. Okay. See what yours may not look like this. If yours does not, choose Projects if you have to. If yours looks like this, great. We want to check where it says Book Library and say OK. All right. Now it's put in a reference. It may or may not be there. I'm not worried about it, but it has put in a reference for us. All right. So, time to come in, start writing some code. Okay. Now, I didn't write a boatload of methods in here, but there'll be a few of them. Main is not exactly a driver in here. I could have written this much better, and I've got two choices. I can do what I do a lot of times with you guys, which is try to rewrite things on the fly as I'm giving them to you, which usually has terrible results. Or I can just use basically what I've done so far. So that's what I'm going to do, because it's not my intention here to screw with any of you. All right? So what I'm going to do is at the very top, so before main, I'm going to basically have one global variable in here, or one class level variable. Okay? And I'm going to type this in. Static bookstore. And don't worry about that. I'm going to say BS for bookstore. If you don't like that, if you find that offensive, then don't use that. Equals new bookstore. All right. Now, it's giving me errors. Let's see if we can see why. It says the type or namespace could not be found. Missing or using a directive or assembly. Let's see. Now look what it's asking me if I click that. Do you want to add using book library? You bet we do. So I'm going to choose that. Now it put it up here, and now the errors are gone. All right. Now, could we have done that without putting in that reference that we did originally? I don't think so, but maybe you can try that on your own if you'd like to. All right. So we now have our using book library, and notice it put it at the top because it automatically alphabetizes this. If you don't like that, you can move it. And if we don't even use these, you could probably even remove all of these. I'm just going to leave everything in there that's in there. All right. So now I'm going to put in here global bookstore variable. Now notice I put global in double quotes. All right. Technically, if something is global, it's available everywhere to everyone. This is going to be available throughout this entire program. And what I mean is it's going to be available in this entire namespace of Bookstore Console. I'm asking you this question. Do you think if I went back to the books class or the book class library file or the bookstore class library file, do you think that either one of those classes would have any idea what BS here means? No. It's only available through here. So maybe global isn't the right word, but I put it in there because when you start working with a lot of projects and or you start working with a lot of forms, what's global becomes kind of strange to people. What's global and what's not global. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to write main quickly. All right. And it's only about 10 lines, and then we're taking a break. All right. So we're going to do, now again, you've got two choices. You can either come in here and say using static system.console, all right, or you can leave it off. If you leave it off, you got to type in console.writeLine. If you put it in like I'm going to do, you just have to write write line or read line. Okay, so I'm going to do this. All right, so it's console dot, I don't need the console, sorry. It's a write line, and I'm going to put in here I'm just going to start with a blank line. Welcome, boy, oh boy, welcome to the bookstore. Another \n, \n. Whoops, \n. All right. I want this. I could keep typing here. We talked a little about word wrap. I still have to show you that, but I'm just going to put this on a new line. So another right line. And I'm going to say in here, first, you create some book inventory. All right. And then you can add one or more of that inventory. Make this a little smaller. Well, I guess I have word wrap turned on. To your shopping cart. Okay. Finally, oops, not there. Finally, at checkout time, you get the total value of all books in the cart. All right. So I'm going to write that. So if you look on the screen, everybody, for just a second, if I run this program now, what is it saying? A project cannot be started. Oh, right now it thinks it's trying to start it from the class library, right? So what do I have to do? Even if so you say, oh, I'll just come in here like we've been doing, right mouse click and say set a startup project. Okay, I'll run it again. And, well, it just disappeared. Well, I think I'm going to need a read line here so it doesn't disappear. I may remove that later, but I want to see if I'm getting that stuff. There it is. So that's what I've got right now. I know it's not much. It's not really anything. It's what we did in the first few days of class. The point is, we now have some stuff in here. All right, and I'm just going to quit that. All right, so after this read line here, I'm going to put in about 5 lines of code, then we're taking our break. So int, I'm going to call this option, and I'm going to set it equal to -1. You'll understand that later. And now I'm going to say while option not equal to 0, and 0 is going to be the way that we get out of this menu. Option equals select menu option. We're going to get an error because we haven't written that yet. We're going to write it after the break. And we're going to get an error on this one because we haven't written that one either. But the good news is that's it for me. Okay? Now, I do want, again, I can put these in right now, but I can also go onto here and I can say click there and tell it to generate it for me. So there's 1. All right. And then down below that, I can click on this one and tell it to generate it for me. And there's 2. All right. So I now have perform menu option and select menu option. I'm going to change the order because I guess I did the other one first. All right. Now we're going to have to make massive changes to both of these. But we've got that in there. So I'm going to do a save, and it's 8:58. Let's come back, please. Let's make it 9:10.